Good evening, fellow ghouls, and thanks for stopping by on this stormy evening. It's good to have you back here at Aberfoyle Manor. I'm happy to see that I haven't scared you away just yet. As you can see, there's another storm passing through the area, so I thought I'd build a fire and hunker down with my book of true scary stories. Would you like to hear another twisted tale of terror from my collection? Well, say no more. I'm sure I can find a good one for us in here. Ah, yes. How about this one? I call it The Art of Darkness. When I was maybe 19 or 20, I worked at an art gallery in an old house on top of a hill. I was in college at the time, but my college experience wasn't exactly normal. I went to art school and studied illustration. There were a number of art galleries affiliated with my school that would display student work, and students could work at these locations to make a little money and offset their tuition. I lived near the gallery on top of the hill, so, as soon as I could, I applied to work the front desk. I got the job. The cool thing was, it was barely a job. All I had to do was sit behind the desk and keep track of the visitors with one of those little pitch counters. If someone entered, I was to click the counter and then write down the total number of visitors before leaving. My shift was at the end of the day, so then I just had to turn off all the lights and lock all the doors before I left. Like I said, it was pretty cushy, so I could mostly just sit behind the desk and do my homework while also getting paid. Not a bad deal. My shift was on a Saturday afternoon. I came in at 1 p.m. and closed at 7 p.m. As mentioned before, the gallery was in an old house on top of a hill. It was a large historic building built in the early 1860s. It had a unique sort of minimal Italian Renaissance style. Inside, the rooms of the gallery had high ceilings and large doors, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the trees outside. For the first couple of weeks that I worked there, I actually quite enjoyed it. Things were always pretty quiet around the gallery on Saturday. A few people would stop in, walk around the rooms, and leave. Even though I was studying illustration, I had some liberal arts classes too, so I'd mostly get my reading done. I think I was also taking art history at the time, and I had to frequently write essays on old works of art and their significance. The quiet of the gallery was a great place to focus on those too. A couple weeks into the job, my roommate Joe came to visit me one day at the gallery and brought me a coffee. It was getting later into the fall season, and it was starting to get colder in the evenings. Joe walked through the doors of the gallery and was immediately in awe of the architecture. "Holy crap," Joe interjected. "This place is huge." "What?" I said. "You haven't been to this gallery before?" "No, not yet," Joe confirmed. "None of the shows seem that good, but wow, this building is pretty cool. Hey, you think I could shoot in here next weekend?" Now, my roommate Joe was not studying illustration. He was in photography. He was studying light and developing film, and the large windows and hilltop position of the gallery admittedly offered an incredible place to shoot. "Yeah, do you think I could take a few photos in here?" Joe asked again. "I'll bring a camera and just walk around a bit. The angles of the building are so intense. Look at these shadows at sunset. It's got a really spooky vibe. It's going to photograph so well, it's practically going to shoot itself." "Sure," I said. "I think that'd be fine. The gallery's usually pretty quiet at the end of the day." Anyway, Joe and I made plans for the next weekend. That evening, alone in the gallery, I drank my coffee and finished my art history essay. Afterwards, as I walked around locking up, I thought of what Joe had said about the building. I hadn't really noticed just how shadowy and spooky the building could be. Maybe it was the power of suggestion, but I found myself looking over my own shoulder as I walked down the hill and back towards the dorms after my shift. The old building loomed a bit more ominously from the hilltop, its dark silhouette peeking out over the surrounding trees. The following Saturday, I came in at my normal time, arriving at 1 p.m. The person who had the shift before me, a nice guy named Steven, told me that the first half of the day had been quiet. I settled in for another autumn afternoon and waited for Joe to arrive with his camera. Sunlight bounced off the golden leaves outside, casting warm ripples of light across the student art on the walls. I pulled out my laptop and continued work on an essay. A few paragraphs in, I remember seeing someone walk by in my peripheral vision. I was staring down at my computer screen, but I definitely saw someone cross from a small gallery room into the main gallery room, a path that took them directly by the main entrance and precisely through my field of view. I didn't pay much attention to this, as it was just someone wandering about the gallery, which was completely typical. No one had entered during my shift, so this had to be someone who had been there since Steven's shift before, and who was just taking their time. I went back to my work, reaching the end of my first draft, and then scrolling back up to the first page to begin my editing process. Just as I did, I heard this voice. A voice from the other room. It was quiet, but it was there. Barely above a whisper. It was coming from the main room, the same room I had seen someone walk into earlier. I wondered for a moment why whoever was in there was talking to themselves, but I guess they were just on their phone. Just then, the front door to the gallery swung open. Joe burst in, loudly greeting me with a friendly, "Hey, buddy." I waved and instinctively reached down for the pitch counter. Even though he probably wasn't going to pay much attention to the art on the walls, Joe still counted as a visitor. I went to click the little lever, but then I noticed something. The counter was at 0. Like I said earlier, employees kept a daily total count of everyone who visited the gallery, so any counts from the shift before mine, Steven's shift, should have been counted on there. I had seen and heard a guest who had been there since before I arrived, so there was no way that 0 could be right. I figured maybe Steven had reset the counter and recorded the visitors from his shift separately, even though he'd never done that before and wasn't supposed to. But when I checked the binder where we wrote down the totals, nothing was in there yet for today. Steven had said it was quiet earlier. Maybe he had just forgotten to count the guests. I picked up the pitch counter and walked over into the main gallery room. It was empty. It was one large room, currently home to maybe 20 separate works of student art, both mounted on the walls and freestanding in the center of the floor. Paintings, sculptures, but not a single visitor. I knew that I had seen someone walk in there, and I'd heard their whispers echoing as well. It had been unmistakable. I stared into the room, dumbfounded, and felt a shiver run up my spine as I realized that it could not be explained. "You okay?" Joe asked. "What's wrong?" Nothing," I replied, not quite sure what to make of the situation. "Okay, well, the sun's about to start setting," Joe pointed out. "I'm just going to walk around and try to snap a few good pictures." "Sounds good," I said absent-mindedly, walking back to the reception desk and grabbing my cell phone. I texted Steven, asking if he had seen or heard anyone earlier in the day. "Hey, Steven, hope the day is good," I tapped out on my screen. "Did you maybe forget to log the visitors from the first half of today? The counter's at 0 and there's nothing written down." Steven texted me back almost instantly. "Nope, the counter's right. No guests this morning at all." Now, that really puzzled me. The reception desk was right by, and in plain view of the front door. The door also made a loud sound when opening, so there was absolutely no way you could miss someone entering the gallery. I trusted Stephen that he hadn't seen anyone in the morning shift, but I also wanted to trust myself. I had seen someone cross into the main room. There was no way I could have imagined it, or the whispering voice. I settled back down into my chair, a feeling of unease descending upon me like a growing sickness. As the sun fell towards the horizon outside, the dark corners of the vintage architecture began to fill with shadow, the musty blackness seeping into the building like blood through fabric. I began to feel a tingling in the back of my head. Was it fear? Had I seen a ghost? Had I heard the voice of a spirit? Joe snapped me out of my trance. "Hey, can I get some shots upstairs?" To the left of the reception desk was a huge, wide staircase to the second floor. An ornate railing carved in dark wood ran along the right side, leading up to another tall set of windows on the second floor. Beyond them was a closed and locked door. I had been told that the second floor was just storage and some old, currently unused administrative offices. I didn't have the key to this door, and had never had any reason to go up there. "Sorry," I told Joe. "It's just a bunch of empty rooms up there that nobody uses. I don't even have the key." "Empty?" Joe questioned. "There's someone walking around up there." "What?" I asked. "You heard something? I'm the only person working here today." Joe just looked at me, still holding his camera and beckoning with his other hand. I got up and followed him into one of the side rooms. "Listen," he whispered, pointing up to the ceiling. For a few moments we stood there in silence. I heard an old pipe clanking somewhere and was wondering if Joe had just mistaken the noise when... creak? A smaller creak or two followed, my eyes tracing their pathway across the ceiling. The creaks moved from one side of the room to the other. "See?" Joe said. "I think you've got company." "Somebody must be working up there," I guessed. Not sure how sure of myself I sounded. I pulled out my phone and texted Stephen once more, asking if anyone had come in during the first half of the day to work upstairs for some reason. Once more, he texted back almost instantly. "No, I opened up at the beginning of the day. Nobody else came in." Joe looked at me expectantly. "Should we go check it out?" Joe and I made our way over to the staircase. I didn't mention my strange experience earlier, which still had me feeling a bit unsettled. The sun was much lower now, and the pieces of sky poking through the trees had begun to turn into a cold blue. Joe and I crept up the stairs, listening intently for any more sounds coming from the second floor. We reached the large windows at the top of the flight and turned to the tall doors on our right. I cautiously reached out and jiggled the handle. It was locked. Joe decided to knock loudly, rapping on the old wood 3 or 4 times. "Hello, anyone there?" he called out. We stood silently in the darkness, the light from the windows rapidly fading. There was no answer from the other side of the door. It was the only way upstairs, and it was locked. "Well," Joe resigned, "I guess we were just hearing things." That was just how Joe was, quick to become interested and also quick to lose interest. If the action was over, he was ready to move on. I checked the door handle one last time, and we went back downstairs. It was getting close to 7, so I started the lockup procedure, and Joe took a few more pictures around the gallery. I shut off all the lights and locked the various doors downstairs. I recorded Joe as the one visitor for the day and packed up my laptop and charger. "Okay, Joe," I called out. "I have to close up." Joe put on his jacket and snapped his last few exposures on his way out. The two of us stepped into the chilly autumn evening, and I locked the front doors behind me, taking extra care to make sure they were secure. Joe and I walked back down the hill. I kept working at the gallery for the rest of the semester. Nothing else strange ever happened there, at least not to me. I did come to learn, though, that the building had a bit of a reputation and was said to be haunted. There were many stories, like local folklore on campus, of odd experiences in the building. People hearing things, people seeing things. A friend of a friend insisted that, as she had been walking by late at night, she had seen someone standing in one of the windows. A week or two after our experience, Joe had told me to come see him in the photography studio. I happened to be nearby that evening and headed over right away. Inside, Joe was developing the film from his last few shoots, toiling over plastic trays of various chemicals in the red light of the dark room. "Hey, you're here," he exclaimed. "Take a look at this." He guided me over to one of his photographs, hanging clothespined on a line of string running across the ceiling. It was a picture of the dark wooden stairs at the art gallery. "I took that one really quickly as we were leaving," he said. "Take a look at the top of the stairs." I squinted in the darkness and focused on the large windows at the top of the stairs, looking out onto the trees silhouetted in the glow of the evening sky. "What am I looking for?" I asked. "Not at the windows," Joe clarified. "Look to the right. The weird shadow." My eyes shifted, noticing the irregular shape of the darkness next to the window by the door we had knocked on that eerie evening. "It looks like a person, I swear." I had to admit, I could almost make out a shoulder and a head peeking out of the darkness, almost made of the darkness itself. I would never deny the influence of the power of suggestion, but either way, it did look like someone by the window, hiding in the darkness, watching us. Ooh, another twisted tale of true terror. Can you imagine finding an apparition on your film? That would be quite the interesting development. Did you hear that? Speaking of shadows, it sounds like the shadow demon has returned. Dr. Wolfula told me to shine some light on him, but I think I need a brighter source. No. He's found us here in the study. We're not safe here any longer. That's all for now, fellow ghouls. You should leave quickly if you value your lives. Go! Go!